Hello and welcome to a brand new edition of the Mumbai Manifesto. You described the journey really very beautifully, the essence of which was othering, a separation of feeling of oneness, where everybody was one in the public realm. Now there are clear divides that are emerging. I in fact remember older buildings had very short walls. If you look at the walls of buildings today, they're kind of made to keep people out, you know, and keep certain privileged people in. But Mumbai has always been the financial capital. We've always had the VIPs in this city, and it is a bunch of these people living on this small island that have steered the economic course of India.
Correct.
And it is very important people, very important decisions, very important institutions. There is a frustration amongst this class also that while contributing so much value in terms of taxes, in terms of jobs, in terms of just image of the city, of the country, there's a frustration that they're not getting their money's worth, right? Therefore, it kind of justifies in their eyes that you make car-specific infrastructure, that you make these beautiful tall glass buildings that you speak of. At the same time, in this journey of Bombay to Mumbai, we find that 6 out of 10 Mumbaikars reside in informal settlements, slums. We're not even able to provide housing, and the number of people coming in, because it is at the end of the day a city of dreams. Number of people coming in, how can the government provide for all these people, you know? It's a big challenge. And then there is a class of people who want to live in a world-class city. They're very hard-working people. Why can't Mumbai be a world-class city? Why can't Mumbai be a Shanghai? Why can't Mumbai be a New York or a London or a Singapore? Is this not a valid aspiration? But for that, the slums have to go. And slums have to go is such a broad statement. It's now in the news again. As part of certain statements that came through from certain ministers and politicians, that there is an aspiration. We want to remove the slums from Mumbai. As a social scientist, having worked so closely with slum communities, particularly in Dharavi, in the infamous M East ward, everything east of the Mithi River, how do you view this? Is this actually something that can become a reality? Is this something which is an exclusionary approach? Is this even a justified desire to have slum-free Mumbai?
Actually, I would kind of try to flip this entire vision. Okay, I definitely think it is very possible to have a slum-free Mumbai. Okay, but it really depends on what do you see a slum as, and then what do you want to be free of. Okay, and both these questions are important. Okay, so I will first answer this in two parts, if it's okay, Gautam. Okay, and the first part is, I think since the 1990s, our politicians, and I'm particularly calling it politicians, in alliance with bureaucrats, real estate business in particular, have begun to frame the issue of slum only as a housing problem. Okay, and therefore the solution to this is then create a building which makes this problem go away. Okay. Now what have we found? Since 1990 we have been experimenting with more and more intensified forms of slum redevelopment. Okay. My research actually shows that this kind of intensification of forms not only does not make the slums go away, but rather the kind of life that one is creating in some of these buildings is no less than what is a slum. We may have only replaced a horizontal slum by a vertical slum. Okay, so this to my mind is a narrowness of vision. Okay, and if you want to achieve this kind of a slum-free Mumbai, it will never happen. Okay, because it is only fueling the pockets of a particular nexus in Mumbai. Thinking about slum-freeness in another way, where if you can see a slum as a nexus of multiple exclusions. So these are caste-based exclusions, these are religion-based exclusions, these are class-based exclusions, and these are also housing and basic services-based exclusions. So it's like really so many intersecting exclusions which come through. Now, if you want to address it comprehensively, you will need to have a much more comprehensive approach and something which is embedded within the overall city fabric and city economy, the policy, the kind of labor policies that we have, the kind of social amenities and infrastructures that we have. Okay, I'll just give you one example. Okay, so when I began my journey as a social worker, I was working and spent a whole lot of time in several, I would say, pockets of slums in Mumbai, and I have never seen a substantive difference between those neighborhoods and the neighborhood in which I stayed in Sion.
In what way?
That there was tremendous community infrastructure and amenities right in the proximity of several of these slum settlements. There was a lot of community spirit, people knew each other, and they had societies. So maybe you had a few things within your house, or maybe your houses were small, but so was a chawl housing. So was the apartment where I was staying in, which was barely 500 square feet or so. Okay. So I think these kind of degrees of separation, and social infrastructure was common. You had gardens which were common. Nobody had gardens within. Okay. Now I think you've started accentuating these issues by slum is equal to housing. But the minute you create slum housing, there is no entitlement to a garden. What begins to happen, you look at so many of the contemporary developments, you will see that the slum building is on one side.
Yes.
And then you have a exclusive garden, swimming pool, everything which is there for the for-profit building. Okay. So you create newer kinds of layers of what are you entitled to and what are you not entitled to, and therefore the grades of inequity, I think, within the society start becoming bigger. The second thing which has happened,
despite the fact that they've got a house now,
despite the fact that they have
living in a building,
a formal house,
yes,
address now,
right.
More importantly, I think the prospects of economic mobility, which Mumbai's infrastructure or Mumbai's predominant manufacturing economy presented itself. Today, what is the economy of Mumbai? The economy of Mumbai today is only two. Number one, you have real estate, and second, you have services. Okay. Now, within both of these sectors, so real estate sector, if you look at it from the perspective of employment, then you only have basically the construction labor, which is fairly well paid in some ways, but at the same time there is a lot of risk which is involved within that, and particularly because here the technology is constantly changing, etc. So this is a layer of migrant labor which is not fully integrated always into the city, right? So the second is services, and where again with the platform economies, etc. that we have, you again have many degrees of non-security and non-mobility which are built in, right? So what is left then? Left is the manufacturing then which happens and which has shifted completely to the informal sector. So today if we look at Dharavi, today if we look at many other larger settlements, even in M East Ward, where the recycling economy and scrap shops are there. So you are basically seeing that the locus of production has shifted to the slums, in a place where there will be absolutely no space for any kind of labor law to come in.
Correct.
And therefore the conditions of work which will always remain very, very hazardous.
Correct.
And not giving mobility. Okay. The the Mumbai that I was talking of.
When you say mobility,
in the past,
what do you mean in this?
Economic mobility.
Economic mobility.
That you are trying to look for dreams. You come to the city with dreams. You would like to do better for your children, and all of this is contingent on your economic mobility.
Correct. So there's a kind of glass ceiling that they have hit. I have a couple of follow-up questions on this. I mean, one is that the big question is, what would be your vision of a slum-free Mumbai? What would it look like in its physicality? That is one. The second is that, we romanticize often the idea of the success of Dharavi. Some people don't even consider it a slum anymore, in terms of when you compare it to the profiles of certain other slums that you would find in Mankhurd, for example. There are vastly different qualities of life also, vastly different social amenities that they have access to. Manufacturing, in some way, it's a pride of Mumbai. The enterprise of Dharavi, the enterprise in the midst of adversity, it's something to be proud of. But it skirts around the law. There is a lot of illegality in it. Human right violations are very regular as part of this. Workplace conditions are hazardous. There are no laws that are looked at. And a lot of people use the term horizontality to kind of explain how this ecosystem works. Whereas if I take this horizontality and put it into a building which is redeveloped, that whole ecosystem perishes. What is the middle ground? I mean, is it that we think in perpetuity we are going to have a little bit of this illegality going on in the city to keep the enterprise going? Or do we say, no, we're giving you a house, it's worth a few crore rupees, it's in the middle of the city in Dharavi now, across from Bandra Kurla complex, make your own opportunity. We've broken glass ceilings. Is this going to happen, or is this just a pipe dream?
Yeah, so I think responding to your second question is perhaps simpler, okay? That creating a real estate asset for a person or a household who will not be able to sustain it is really a pipe dream for that person, because the costs of living in that particular asset are too high. And often one can see that there are built-in processes where the person will begin to get displaced from that project, perhaps even before the project takes shape. Okay, leave alone looking at then. Now we are talking about rules like you have to hold on for 4 years and 7 years. Earlier it was 10 years and so on. So that is simpler. Okay, what does one do about the informal economy? I think that's a much more complex question. Okay, because there are so many kinds of informal economies. Some of the illegalities may be much more simpler to actually think through. For example, there are many small producers, even food producers for that matter, or traders, or shops, retail outlets, etc., for whom laws like the GST, the income tax, these may be too tough in terms of becoming a part of that. They are too small for it. So these are scale questions, and I think it's easier perhaps to find ways, I mean, if the law were so forgiving, to create a space for them within the law, right? Or to say ki just as ki we say in income tax ki above a particular income ceiling, then you have to, but at the same time registrations can happen, right? So I think that is much more simple. But I think the tough part is really creating the enabling conditions. Like you have a food production industry, there is farsan which is being made, and you have workers working and living in that same spot, right? The workers perhaps are also migrant workers. They want to also save on place, don't want to invest in housing at all, and therefore they are, in some ways it's their choice, if one can call it a choice at all, to live in that hazardous place and perhaps to also live with all the risks which they live there, right? So now these things, these kind of illegalities, and making them labor law compliant, I think is a much more tough job. And it's, I think, whether one should go for the implementation of labor laws, or whether one should, through formalization, ensure that this entire industry will disappear. I think these are the kind of very double-minded questions which lie some. But my issue would be that we have never tried either way.
Correct.
And I think we perhaps what is required here is a much more grounded approach, approach which begins to work together both with the employers as well as the workers to find out what are the means that one can find here. No, is there, like, I'll just on a different scale, where even small medium operators and producers have found it difficult to invest in environmentally protective legislations like having effluent tanks, etc. Their green tribunals and I think wise judges have intervened and tried to create common facilities.
Correct.
No, and I think these kind of solutions are very much possible.
Right.
No? Where the state comes in as a party, where the employers are also involved. We have a very good example in Maharashtra in the form of a Mathadi board, which is also in some ways a partnership between the state as well as the employers and the employees, all of them having a share. So I think these are the ways to go forward, but otherwise there is no...
if I can play devil's advocate a little bit here, I hear you. I think what you're saying in some ways is you can't let just the forces of the free market and capitalism drive the future of the city. There has to be a heart in the planning which recognizes that all those residents who have these glass ceilings in their life by virtue of their circumstances, their places of work, their choice of work, their places of residence, we need to involve them, we need to keep them as a part of the future of the city, and we have to think it through. And that a knee-jerk approach is always going to be devastating in terms of allowing this population to sustain its livelihood. But if you look at one of the oldest communities in Mumbai, say the Kolis, right? If you look at how that profile and their lifestyles and their livelihoods have changed, trawling has come in, big fishing trawlers have come in, so the small Koli fisherman is dying a death of, it's not viable anymore. The young generation it's still something that makes money, but the young generation doesn't want to go for 4 days and 5 days into the deep sea, come back, fish, and then sort the fish, clean the nets, clean the boat, repair it. They're much happier looking for desk jobs. So why is it that we are not being able to see this transition of this informal sector being able to access quality education so that at least the next generation or the generation after enters the service industry you spoke of or can become an entrepreneur? India is growing, India is a land of opportunity. Why is it that this glass ceiling still exists?
See, I think the bullies are a different game. Number one, on one hand, I think the process that you are describing, Gautam, is very much in place in relation to them. That they have consistently been deprived of livelihoods, that there are so many threats to their livelihoods, whether it is the so-called development projects or the construction of different bridges and so on and so forth, or it may be the sheer creation of channelized waterways, which has also impacted them, and just as it is the trawlers in the big seas, right? But on the other hand, the Kolis have very much been a assertive community in terms of one of the big assets that they have had is their gauthans and their lands. And I definitely think it is a big success for them when in the last development plan of the city, they were successful in saying that all the Koli gauthans, the East Indian gauthans, should be demarcated as gauthans.
Correct.
No? So it's a offsetting between like a couple of losses and the assets, and by this then they have also been able to gain entry into some of the formal sectors as well. You cannot say the same things, however, with the tribals in Mumbai. Okay. Today you will not see, in the 1990s we were working in a few padas in RA and in Borivali National Park. And one of the big struggles that we had was to actually prove that there were tribals in Mumbai.
Correct.
Okay, so proving that you're a tribal. I'm not even talking of कि their entire existence was wiped off by the city in such a manner कि now the city is the reality and the tribals have to prove that their being a tribal is a reality.
Correct.
Okay, so that's the kind of wiping which can happen.
Right.
Right. Whereas with the Kolis, this is not happening.